Welcome to the WanderLearn show. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. In this episode, I talk to Eric Gilbertson, who is a man who is trying to climb the tallest mountain of every country in the world. He is 2/3 of the way there. You'll also hear about his experience trying to climb the tallest mountain of Libya and Chad, and why he got blocked in that attempt. This is definitely a fascinating conversation, and I look forward to talking to Eric throughout his multi-year journey to accomplish this crazy goal. This episode is brought to you by my patrons at patreon.com/ftapon. Become a patron, get some rewards. Thank you so much. And here's Eric Gilbertson. Let's talk about a different death zone, the border between Chad and Libya.
You know about that.
I do know all about that, but I'm going to let you talk this time. So I want you to tell me about that misadventure.
Yeah, we went to N'Djamena and Chad last December, and the goal was to get to Chad.
You're talking about
me and two friends, Serge and Ginge.
Okay.
And we were hoping to get the Chad-Libya high points. We needed this one document. We wanted to get all the permission, though. They require some documentation to leave the area around the capital city. This permit circular, I can't remember exactly what it's called. And you need like 10 government ministers to sign off on it. And so Ginge got there like a week early, and we sent in the paperwork, and we thought it was going to get ready in time. But it kept being delays and delays. We ended up waiting there for a week. We were all ready to go. There was just like 2 ministers that were out of town, and they didn't have deputy ministers, and they wouldn't sign it. So we never got permission. So we had to abort the mission and climb something else. We later heard that there were like some like rebel activity up in the north, and maybe that was affecting. They weren't actually going to give the permits anyway.
Well, Ginge has done that mountain twice. He's probably the only person, well, besides maybe one of his guides, who's done it twice. I don't remember when I did it. I only got, I think, the Ministry of Tourism, something like that. I can't remember who gave it to me. Either the Ministry of the Interior or Ministry of Tourism, one of those two. But I definitely did not have to go to 10 different places. So obviously something has changed. And Ginge would also say the same thing to you. He probably said to you, it wasn't like this before. Didn't he say that or no?
Wasn't there like an attempted coup or something in the past few years? I think things maybe have gotten more difficult since then.
No question, but that's the point. I'm just saying that it wasn't that complicated before, so things are definitely seem to be a lot more complicated now.
Yeah, definitely more complicated. From the people we talked to in Chad, no one was getting permits. Even the like people that weren't climbing mountains that just wanted to go outside of town. Like ministry people, they weren't getting permits for anything.
Just regular tourists who want to go check out some rock formation?
No, like people with churches that are going to like teach schools.
Okay.
Yeah, if the government's not giving them permits, they're not giving anyone permits.
You obviously still want to do those 2 mountains. What's your plan B now? Because you're a persistent guy. You're not going to give up. I mean, that's 2 weeks down the drain and probably a lot of money. But at the same time, you know it's possible and doable. So what's your plan? How are you going to avoid this problem? Is there any way that you can find out how many signatures you need in the future?
Our contacts in Chad recommended trying to start the process significantly earlier. So like instead of like a week in advance, maybe a month in advance. Maybe if the ministers are going in and out, there'll be enough overlap that they'll all get the signatures then. I'm not sure exactly though.
How much bribery is involved? Do you have any idea?
Oh, and getting the permissions?
Correct. Yeah, because some ministers will say, "What's in it for me?" To give you my autograph.
Yeah, I mean, if they were there in person, we would have tried that. We tried calling them up and we got them on the phone, but they were like, "Yeah, I'm in the other part of the country and I won't be back for a week, and it has to be their signature." Yeah, I'm sure there's a way around it. We didn't figure that out.
So your plan B is to just get there a lot, or maybe not get there, but just try to do all the procedures from far away, from the United States or whatever, and then
Yeah, that's what they recommended. I mean, they would know best, my contacts on the ground there. So,
okay.
I mean, coming in from Libya is not really an option because Jin's tried that for a long time, and it's even worse political situation.
Yeah, and more dangerous, not just political. I mean, probably politically, you could probably swing it more. I guess the logistics in some ways is easier if you come in from Libya, in the sense that you just got to bribe every checkpoint or something like that. But of course, there's a legitimate danger there. But why not try that with Chad? Would you have considered that? Just drive and leave, and you're going to hit a checkpoint and just give everybody you meet $100 and just keep doing that until you get to your destination. Because there's not that many checkpoints. There's probably 10, 20 checkpoints or something like that. And if you give everybody $100, that's like $2,000. I don't know.
I mean, that could be a plan C. Try the plan B, go there on the ground. If they don't give the permission, I mean, if you think that would work, you're more of an expert in Chad than I am.
Yeah, but I have never tried that route. I just imagined, well, what would I do if they said no? Then what if you just go and every single checkpoint, there's a person there who asks for your papers? I mean, the other option is just to forge your papers. Too bad I don't have my original documents, because then I would know what they're supposed to look like. But then you could probably just forge them and get past, at least half the checkpoints would just get past on a fake document. Anyway. In Africa, you have to definitely be creative, but it's very frustrating that you're all ready to go, and this is a tough and not that hard of a mountain. But
yeah,
anyway.
We also paid kind of a lot of deposit to the helpers there, and they're not just going to give it back. So the money's kind of been invested. So we've already paid part of it to the helper people there.
When you go again, can you do something?
Yeah, it's not all lost. It's like, okay, next time, not as expensive.
Right. That one country, Bhutan, I think it is. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's the highest. That has Ganga Punsum, the highest unclimbed mountain in the world. So it's definitely the crux of the country high point list.
Tell us about it.
So Bhutan. So some people attempted to climb it in the 80s. It was actually open for mountaineering, but they weren't successful. And it's in Bhutan in the 90s, they closed all mountains, I think, above 6,000 meters to climbing. And maybe it's lower than that for religious reasons. So there was one more attempt in the 90s by a Japanese team from the China side, because the mountain's on a disputed border with China. So they got most of the way up, and then China decided they didn't want to annoy Bhutan. Bhutan was protesting, so China revoked permission, and that team turned around early. So those are the only attempts, and since then, there hasn't been any permission given. So that's a big question mark it's possible situation will change, political situations change a lot. That's a question mark, though, how to get that one.
Justine Kirby asks about countries that don't have mountains like many of the small Pacific countries. Will you instead visit some strange high point? How are you going to deal with those?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a highest point for every country. It might not be a big snowy mountain. But like in the Pacific Islands, there's still little hills. And these are actually very difficult. The main difficulty is finding where the highest point is. It's not like a big volcano, you know where the top is.
Right.
So there's different ways to do this. There's satellites can measure elevation, SRTM. You see that on Google Maps or Google Earth, but that's not always accurate enough. There's LiDAR, a plane can fly over, but they're not going to do that for every country. That's expensive. Some countries, they actually do land surveys. So like Tuvalu, I was looking into this one for a long time. What's the high point? And the UN actually in 1986 did a land survey doing transects of every island. So I found where the high point of that is. But other islands like Marshall Islands, I think there's too much uncertainty. It hasn't been surveyed. No one knows exactly which of the 50 islands the high point is.
You inspired me when I was in Gambia, because the high point was not exactly where I thought. And so eventually You taught me where it really was. And even with Togo, there's a controversy. With Ghana, there's a controversy. So a lot of West African, not a lot, but a few West African peaks, the official high point is actually not the high point. So West African of them. So tell us about the little gadget that you had to help figure out where you were. You brought a techno gadget that communicates with satellites.
Yeah, so I did some research. There were a handful of West African countries where the high point wasn't known with certainty. So the high point that everyone thought, I double checked with the satellite data, which has global coverage, and there were other candidates, and they were all within the error bounds of each other. So no one knew exactly. There hadn't been any ground surveys. So what I did was I brought this really fancy GPS unit with me. It's like this $10,000 or $20,000 unit that can get 3 centimeters vertical accuracy if you sit it at a location for an hour. And then you post-process the data, which I had professional engineers do. So for each of these countries in West Africa, I brought this unit to all the candidate high points and measured the exact elevation. So in Gambia, I chose the top 4 candidates based on satellite measurements. And I took this unit there. And they were all within like several meters of height of each other. So there's no way you can tell by looking. But with this device, then I measured, okay, this one, Sarfiri Hill, didn't really have a name, but that was like the name of the nearest village. So that one's the high point of the Gambia. And then Togo, Mount Otilakutse is the true high point. Not Mount Agu, which all the sources online say. And then, what was it? Guinea-Bissau, Mount Rondé is the high point, not this other unnamed hill nearby that people used to think. So it's like a Trimble Geo XR GPS unit. So I just rented it, or this company, Compass Data, just lent it to me for free because I thought it was a neat project. So that's the unit that measures the elevation.
You had to give it back, though.
Just kept it for the trip. And actually, the officials were very suspicious because I stored it in a Pelican case in the airports. They were always real suspicious because no one comes in there with a Pelican case. So they're always inspecting it.
Pelican cases are these really hard, robust cases that look like almost military.
Yeah, and the survey unit, I need to have it on a tripod, and there's this little like orb on the top that helps correct errors. So on one of the Togo candidate high points, Agu, there were some military guys up there, and that looked really suspicious to them. So they made us get out of there really quick. We got enough measurement, but the equipment looks kind of suspicious, I suppose.
Right. It looks like you're an alien creature landing there, especially Africans who may not be used to seeing that kind of stuff on top of their peaks.
They always thought we were Russian spies. Multiple countries were like, what else would you be?
Why not CIA spies? What's wrong with that?
I don't know. We were going in for the Central African Republic high point from the Cameroon side. We motorcycled in, and just near the border there was a checkpoint, and someone had radioed in, and they weren't going to let us go. My friend, he's really good at getting through these things, and we later made friends with the police and military, and they were like, yeah, we were certain you were Russian spies. It's like, Russian spies, that's what they assume we are.
Who knew? That's funny. I never went all my travels in Africa. Nobody ever called me a Russian spy. So I guess that must be a new thing. Maybe because a Wagner group is there or something like that.
They said they hadn't seen, one guy had never seen white guy there, and one guy hadn't in the past 13 years. But you were there, so maybe you just stuck around him.
Exactly. No, I definitely snuck around the border to get to the tallest point of Central African Republic. I didn't have any struggle, and it's kind of weird. It's kind of like a steep rock that just kind of juts out.
And there's a scramble. The military guy with like a big AK on his back and the police, they had to escort us to the summit. So they scrambled. They were like passing their gun through underneath the chalk stone to get up on the top.
Why? Why didn't they just wait for you at the base? Why did they have to like go all the way up there? Who cares?
I think they actually wanted the view because they were taking all kinds of pictures up there. They were pretty excited.
Funny. Okay, and then Robert Hahn, another person, asked a question. His question was, how has the red tape situation changed since you began this quest? What year did you start this quest? And has the red tape gotten easier or better or worse?
I started like 2010. Denali, the US high point was the first one. It's hard to say if things have improved or not. it seems like some countries get better, some get worse. Like, for instance, Syria used to be not a problem back years ago before the conflict. I had a friend there who invited us over. And, I mean, now it's a problem. I tried to go up from the Lebanon side, and there were, like, snipers up there, and they turned us around. Or we got turned around before then. So some countries get worse. Some countries get better, like Sri Lanka. I tried to go there a couple years ago, and I got to the base. It's like a military communications compound on top, and they wouldn't let me in. I gave myself 3 days there to try to like bribe someone, or I couldn't get in. But now this past month, one of my friends found a contact that said, yeah, it's open now. You can go. So some places get easier, some places get harder. It's kind of hard to know. I'd say if a potentially troubling country opens, the window's open, you got to go quick because it might close again.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and that's certainly true. And I keep waiting for Darfur to open up. What mountain, Eric, is technically, like, name me the top 5 or so mountains that are technically challenging. Obviously, Everest has got to be up there.
I wouldn't say like the most technically difficult. I mean, Everest.
No, I'm saying. Yeah, they have Everest, but I mean, come on, it's tall. What's harder than? I mean, there's obviously harder mountains. K2 is harder, but I mean, what other mountains? You already did Kanchenjunga in India, so what other mountains do you like worried on a technical issue? Forget about the bureaucracy. Assume you got, what would you say is up there?
Oh, that I haven't done yet.
Correct.
I mean, one mountain I did 2 years ago, Pobeda, is much, much more difficult than K2 or Everest. I would say that's among the hardest. It's got altitude, the Kyrgyzstan high point. Yeah, very few people have heard of it, but it's got mixed climbing, ice climbing, like mega cornices, terrible weather, high altitude. That's like it might be the hardest country high point in the world. I'm not sure. But ones I haven't done yet. How high is it? It's like 7,500 meters.
Okay.
But it's a lot farther north. And that increases the apparent altitude, like the pressure at the summit. So it feels like 8,000.
Denali. Yeah, just like Denali does that.
Yeah, so it feels like an 8,000 meter peak.
Yeah.
And I got frostbite on all my fingers on that one coming down, wrapping all these V-threads in a storm. Yeah, so that one might be the hardest in the world. But of the ones I haven't done yet, hard ones, well, Bhutan, nobody knows. That could be very technical. Myanmar has been climbed once for sure. That sounds very... Kakabo Razi, that sounds very technical. I want to survey that one though, because there's another contender in Myanmar that might be higher and it's easier. The Georgia high point Shkara is very technical. I bailed on that one. We got like 18 pitches of ice up and to the summit ridge, and then a blizzard came in. That one's technical.
Did you have to go back and do it?
I haven't returned. We came from the Russia side, which is not an option now. It's on the border with Georgia. So I think the south side on that one, it's a lot of mixed climbing, but I think it's the safer way.
Bhutan, let's say that's your last mountain. What would be your plan of attack?
Well, if China gives permission, that's probably more likely than Bhutan changing their mind. That might be the only option.
You can approach it from Chinese side?
It's on a disputed border. That's how one group that China gave permission to them in the 90s, and they got most of the way up. I think that might be the most likely chance. But some of the hardest ones might actually be political. Like the Yemen high point is a military complex. So like, how do you get permission to go in there?
Yeah.
And there's a couple like that. Like Cyprus, the high point is in like some sort of NATO military zone.
Equatorial Guinea has a military high point on there. I don't know if you went to Equatorial Guinea.
But they give permission.
They did, but recently they've stopped doing that.
Oh, in December they said they would give it.
Oh, that's interesting. Because
I was like this close to going, but all the COVID restrictions all the COVID testing meant it'd take too much time.
I would, be very careful about that, because when I went there, they were constructing a church right near the summit, within a 10-minute walk from the summit, just below it. And when they tell you, we'll give you permission to go to the summit, that's probably what they're talking about. Just going to that church, not to the actual, there's a big round ball, like a radar white ball at the very top, and that is military. And my understanding is that ever since that church has been open to the public, they have stopped letting people go to the actual summit now.
So you made it to the...
to the actual Yeah, it was complicated. I had to basically bribe my way to the top, and I got scolded at the top, but I was actually at the top. I was there before they closed the summit. But anyway, then I went a couple of years later with somebody from South Africa who wanted to go up to the top, and she could not get the permit. I tried my best to get a permit for her, but they just let us go to the church. So anyway, just beware of that.
Yeah, I do have a couple of friends within the past year or two. I thought they got to the church and they just bribed and they got through to the...
Yeah, that's probable. Yeah, that's probable. Yeah. I mean, I could believe that. Yeah. I mean, you can solve a lot of problems with just $100 in Africa. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just $100. But I mean, think about all the other expenses of flying out there and all the other things. I mean, if that's between doing it or not. I got to interview you again, but I also got to wrap this one up. So we'll have a part 2 at some point. Eric, I really admire what you're doing. How can people follow you? Tell us your website.
Countryhighpoints.com is the website.
Awesome.
And then Instagram is Twins to the Tops. So me and my brother do it.
Yes, there's so much more to talk about, Eric. So we will do that. I promise. Thank you again for being on the WanderLearn show, and we'll talk to you later. And that ends this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we've talked about, go to wanderlearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is always my social media username. My website is ftapon.com. Do you want to leave me an anonymous voicemail where you can make a comment or ask a question? Then go to speakpipe.com/ftapon. Furthermore, if you'd like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. Now, 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.